I am Elizabeth Vaquera. I'm the director of the newly established Cisneros Hispanic Leadership Institute here at GW. I'm a sociologist by training. I'm a sociology professor, and I'm also in the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy. And I myself have been doing research on health and education among young immigrants, and particularly Latino, for over 10 years now, so this is very close to my heart and something I'm very interested in. So I'm very honored to be here moderating the session today. The speakers that we have are going to be talking for about 15 minutes each. I'm going to keep a close eye on their timing, but I know they are experts on this, so they'll probably make my job easy. You're going to be hearing from three very interesting people. From first, if I remember correctly, our order, Dennis Stinchcomb is going to talk first. He's the program manager at American University's Center for Latin American and Latino Studies. He's going to give us an overview, which I'm already disclosing there, of research on factors influencing Latino education and health among Latinos. Then we're going to move to Carlos. That was correct. To Robin Hamby. She works at the family partnerships. She's a family partnerships specialist at Fairfax County Public Schools, and she's going to talk about her experiences on family immigrant reunification, particularly bringing and engaging their parents that have been separated from their children, how to reconnect with them, and all the wonderful practices that they are putting in place. And Carlos is last but not least, Carlos Beato. He's the principal at International High School at Langley Park, and he's going to be sharing a lot of the better practices that they are putting in place there and how they are changing the life of quite a few children, immigrant children, refugee children, and they have a lot of diversity. So, and many of you here are already familiar with what the work he's doing. So, without further delay, Dennis, you can take the podium.
Auditorium's a bit exaggerated for our needs, but it'll do. And I guess I'll go ahead and stand behind the podium. But thank you. It's certainly a pleasure to participate in what's been a really great conference so far, and I look forward to stimulating conversations throughout the remainder of the afternoon. Before diving right in, I wanted to thank Olga Costa-Price for the kind invitation. It took, as is often the case, a trip halfway across the country for us to finally meet and for us to discover that our respective centers actually are engaged in a number of complementary endeavors. So I want to thank her for including the center where I'm affiliated, which is the Center for Latin American Latino Studies at American University. I also want to recognize Eric Hirschberg, the director of the Center for Latin American Latino Studies, who allowed me to kind of push aside other commitments to be here today. I also recognize him because as my supervisor, if there's anything wrong with this presentation, it's his fault. Which I won't be presenting anywhere else anytime soon, I'm sure. And so, quickly, at American University, we're undertaking several different research projects focused on Latino communities in the DC metropolitan area, and also a number of initiatives that are looking at factors that are influencing migration more generally from Central America. So there's really a good complementarity there. I'll allude to some of these projects throughout the course of my remarks, and am more than happy to give any more information outside of my allotted 15 minutes if there's interest. And so at Olga and Elizabeth's request, what I've done is kind of just compiled some observations regarding education and health among Latino youth and families, as a way of framing what are really two great, direly needed case examples of interventions that are being spearheaded by my fellow panelists, Robin and Carlos. I've chosen to focus primarily on recently arrived youth and families, which seems to be a trend today. So I'm happy I did so. And I do that because, first of all, the interventions that Robin and Carlos are engaged in are really targeting those populations. And second of all, as we'll see in a moment, the nature and scale of migration, ongoing migration to the DC region, is really impacting second and third generation families, Latino families in the region. And we'll see why. So earlier today, colleagues from MPI and Pew shared some data on migratory patterns, so I don't want to duplicate their efforts. I do have some different visualizations, or at least you'll be entertained for a moment. But I did want to provide a bit of context as we kick off this conversation. So here we have, Randy showed us earlier kind of the levels of unaccompanied youth migration, apprehensions at the border. He showed us those numbers by fiscal year. Here they are broken down by month for the past 6 years. And you can see that where we're at right now is at near record levels for the past fiscal year. And we don't have data yet for September, which was the last month of the fiscal year, but we were already at 52,000 unaccompanied youth, and that's a 50% increase over the previous fiscal year. 6 years ago, when we talked about unaccompanied youth migration, we were talking about Mexican kids, and we weren't really concerned about them making it to U.S. communities because of the way that immigration policy works. Most of the Mexican minors are returned either through expedited removal or through voluntary return to Mexico. But now, recently, since 2014, we've seen a complete inversion of those numbers. And now Central American kids, predominantly from the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, now make up nearly 3/4 of all apprehensions, and the Mexicans have dropped off substantially. And then the other thing that Randy showed us this morning were the family unit Southwest border apprehensions, and they are at record levels for the current fiscal year. We're talking 68,000, which has already surpassed fiscal year 14's records. And just to clarify, because I know that this generates some confusion sometimes, the 68,000 number is individuals within family units, not individual family units. There would be no way that there are enough beds in detention facilities for 68,000 family units. Still, we're talking about 68,000 people, which is just massive. I highlight really quick the country of origin because the country of origin is a predictor of where these kids and families are going to land in the U.S. And what you have here is a map of the placements of unaccompanied children with adult caretakers in the U.S. during the past 3 years. And you'll see Maryland and Virginia are among the top 10 receiving states. The Office of Refugee Resettlement has placed 123,000 unaccompanied minors since October of 2013. 10% of those, 1 out of every 10, are in the DC metropolitan area. This isn't surprising to us because if you map on where these kids are being placed with census data that shows where Salvadoran, Guatemalan, and Honduran populations reside in the U.S., you'll see that they pretty much overlap. This slide never shows up, right? It irritates me. Randy mentioned this morning that Prince George's, Montgomery, and Fairfax counties were the top receiving counties in the DC metropolitan area. I would just add to that and say that those 3 counties are among the top 10 receiving counties nationwide. And when you look at the metropolitan area as a whole, you see that 13,000 kids have been placed with adult sponsors, mainly among those 3 jurisdictions, but also with significant numbers in DC and a growing number in Prince William County. And though we don't have systematic data on where families are ending up, I don't think that we're too far off base to speculate, at least for the sake of argument, that a similar proportion of families are coming to the DC area. So this would mean that in addition to the 13,000 unaccompanied youth, we've also witnessed the arrival of nearly 18,000 women and their children, and at least half of those would have to be minors. So that would bring the total number of youth, of school-aged youth, to somewhere around 20,000. So keep that total in mind when you're thinking about the scale of resources needed by local schools, not only to enroll these youth, but also to develop meaningful interventions that are going to make long-term retention a possibility. I think that's the concern really, is that you can match these kids with a lawyer, sign them up for school in some jurisdictions, but are they going to stay in school? That I think is a really serious question. And of course, since I did this on a Mac and I put it on a Microsoft computer, it's not all that great, but you get the gist. So where am I at? So we know that a vast body of research has proven education to be one of a constellation of variables that impact health outcomes. We know this not only because of academic research, but also because it's kind of common sense, rather intuitive. More education generally leads to better employment opportunities, better working conditions, and better employment-based benefits, principally health insurance. And then higher levels of education are, of course, associated with higher salaries that provide people with the income that they need to live in health-promoting environments. and to encourage and enable them to adopt and maintain healthy behaviors. So knowing what we know about the role of education in determining health outcomes, how do we go about designing strategies for improving academic engagement and achievement among these newly arrived Latino youth? And so in my remaining moments, I want to briefly look at 3 hurdles to educational attainment among this population. First, which I'll mention only in passing, are these youth's pre-migration experiences. So many of these youth have suffered traumatic experiences in their communities of origin and in their transit through Mexico, and this means that they are especially prone to mental and psychosocial disorders, and that they will likely need long-term mental health interventions. I'll leave that there because that's the subject of another breakout session, which you decided not to go to. The other pre-migration circumstances that I would highlight, and of course Robin and Carlos will speak to those, are limited or interrupted formal schooling and limited English proficiency. Wow, I love this. The second hurdle is legal status. So these newcomer youth and families are, by definition, undocumented. And on top of that, many of these unaccompanied youth are being placed with adult sponsors who too are undocumented. And so living in the shadow of deportation and the climate of fear that it engenders obviously is going to have implications for educational and health outcomes. Some of you may have seen from the front page of the Washington Post on Monday that American University recently conducted a survey of over 1,000 households in mixed race and disproportionately Latino neighborhoods throughout the DC metropolitan area. And one of the survey findings is particularly relevant here. Of all the racial groups surveyed, Latino households were the most affected by the fear of deportation. Nearly 70% of Latino respondents reported that either they or someone they knew was at risk of deportation. 40% said that the fear of deportation affected their daily lives a lot, and another 13% said the threat affected their daily lives somewhat. So even if youth themselves are fortunate enough to receive asylum or another form of immigration relief, the vulnerability of their caretaker to deportation has also been linked to adverse outcomes for Latino youth's emotional well-being and mental health. And there's a researcher at the University at Albany, SUNY, Joanna Dreby, who talks about this, framing it in which he terms the burden of deportation. So it's not only the reality of deportation that is affecting educational and health outcomes, but it's the burden, the fear of deportation, what we talk about as deportability. So how do we overcome the barrier of legal status in the current political climate? Well, Randy kind of stole my thunder this morning. You give them a lawyer. That's one of the major remedies. And so researchers at Syracuse University reviewed immigration case outcomes for unaccompanied minors between 2012 and 2014 and found that 85% of unaccompanied youth that showed up at court without an attorney were ordered to leave the country. If you gave children an attorney, though, their chances of legally remaining in the U.S. jumped from 15% to 73%. How is the tri-state, since we were reminded that D.C. is actually a state, how's the tri-state area faring in this regard? Well, not too well. As of August of this year, only 50% of unaccompanied youth and 45% of families with pending cases in immigration courts had access to an attorney. Both of those numbers are below the national average. The national average for unaccompanied youth is 54%, and women and children is 50%. And so the scale of demand has clearly outpaced the capacity of local legal service providers, many of which are providing these services on a pro bono basis. And the third variable that needs to be taken into account when considering Latino youth's prospects for academic success and long-term health outcomes is their household context. Of course, I'm using household context here as a kind of convenient catch-all for a bunch of different variables, including family composition, socioeconomic status, and family functioning. And so it's true that being placed with a sponsor in a home, and that typically means a family member, and we'll see that in a moment, that's probably better than being in a government-funded shelter. But there's also problems with these placements. And so the constraints on resources have made the federal government place children in homes in an average of only 34 days. And so that short time period has meant that a lot of kids are getting placed with older siblings, second cousins, or family friends. And The problem is that we just we only have anecdotal data at this point on what these households look like, how they function, and to what extent they are a source of risk or resiliency for these youth. The only data that we have are from the Government Accountability Office, which released a report last February with the first systematic data on sponsor relationship to unaccompanied youth. And the study found that 60% of youth were placed with a parent, 13% with an aunt or uncle, 12% with a sibling, 8% with a family friend, 6% with another relative, usually a grandparent or a second cousin, and then the remaining 1% with an unrelated sponsor. And so as you can imagine, the dynamics of family reunification in these contexts are quite complex to say the least, and often include step-parents, step-siblings, extended family members, already strained household incomes, long, et cetera. And research has documented how non-traditional, unstable household arrangements can negatively impact a bunch of educational, a bunch of factors that then impact educational attainment, and that's availability and allocation of resources for schooling, parents' educational expectations, and parental engagement in and supervision of school-related activities. We also expect that these household arrangements in many cases often preclude these youth from even enrolling in the first place, and also put them at risk for at-risk behaviors, substance abuse, and criminal and gang involvement. And so building on previous research and these hypotheses at the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies, we're currently undertaking a study of how both local school responses, which vary widely across districts in the DC metropolitan area, and these household circumstances, how these household contexts are kind of shaping youth in school integration experiences. And one of the lead researchers is here, a sociologist at American University, Ernesto Castañeda, and he's helping us out with this research. And it's our hope that that kind of research would inform the work that Robin and Carlos are already actively engaged in. And I'll leave it there because I think that's a good segue into family reunification programs.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Hi, let me get this set up. So can you hear me okay? Oh, I sound so loud. Let me move back a little bit. That was perfect. That was quite the foundation. Well, as you heard, I'm with a group called Family and School Partnerships. It's a small office with the Fairfax County Public School System. And about 6 years ago, I started getting a lot of phone calls from teachers, from social workers, from counselors, because we were the family office, and they wanted to know what we were doing about all these kids that were coming into the schools and having difficulties that went beyond what they typically saw with our newcomers, our immigrant students. And this was 6 to even 8 years ago. And so it was well before we had the surge in the area, or at least in the media. We were seeing it in Fairfax. And I wasn't sure what was going on, and so I let it go. I didn't do anything for a while, and then I continued to get the phone calls. And then I had some parent liaisons come, and they said, we have to do something about the reunification issue. And the only time I had heard of that was through foster care and adoption. So what I'm trying to say is this whole experience for me has been, the expression building an airplane, flying an airplane while building it. For me, it was learning how to fly while building the airplane. So it's been a real learning experience for me. And so we started off and we spent about a year just doing research. Research for us, meaning we read what you write. We were reading what was out there nationally. And there wasn't a lot at the time. And then we started doing our own sort of in-house research, which was basically just surveying ESOL teachers and social workers and parent liaisons and asking them what they were seeing. How were these children being brought to your attention, and what were you finding? And we had a wonderful response as surveys go. And what we were finding is there was an issue. It was all very reactive. These children were coming to the attention because there were academic issues, adjustment issues, attendance issues, behavior issues, the things that you would expect, legal issues to deal with immigration, literacy issues. But what I started finding as I read through these surveys is, and I'm not making it up, out of 33 out of 100 surveys, I kept seeing the same words over and over again. These children are rebellious, they're resentful, and they're feeling rejected. And so when we dug a little bit further, we were finding that, yes, all these kids were in the process of reunifying with, mostly for us parents, but sometimes, as we saw in your research, sometimes with aunts and uncles or a sponsor, sort of a non-relative. And we weren't finding anything out there in terms of what we could do with the children. At the same time, our ESOL department was also dealing with the issue of, by now we're up to the surge, and we were finding we had a lot of SIFE students with interrupted formal education. We actually, because we were basing it not on data, we were basing it on more anecdotal kind of information, we thought we had a huge number of SIFE students. But when we defined it and we really started collecting the information, it's now part of the registration process, we found we really don't have all that many. So we identify our SIFE students now. The label does not follow them for maybe a couple years. It's really just so we can get them extra resources. We have an awesome ESOL department. We've also, this is our first year using a new enhanced ESOL programming. That's what we're calling our change to get children in the right path to graduation or employment. And we have a Newcomer Program, as you'll hear about a great program in a little bit, but for us, we've instituted in 10 of our target high schools, school within a school model for newcomers, for our immigrant students. So the ESOL office is working, our office is working on helping the kids. We're working collaboratively with our, what we call, you heard Penny Gross talking a little bit about neighborhood and community services, which is an office within our human services. We're working with the Department of Family Services, so government, school, all coming together, because we are finding the kids are arriving. They're arriving in, this new family dynamic. You hear about them coming across the border, and for some of the kids that are being linked up with a parent, a biological relative, the stay is even shorter than 34 days. It's very quick, and then boom, 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 we're finding them in the classroom 2 days later, and it's a real culture shock for them. So the children are coming to homes where they thought perhaps they were coming to wealthy homes, and they're coming to homes that are being shared with 2 or 3 other families. They're coming to homes that are financially strapped, limited in the English that's being spoken in the home. As we saw in listening to Daisy and seeing the young people in the film, they're starting to understand what it means to not have legal status. So that, along with healthcare, we're dealing with quite a lot. So the only thing I felt I could do competently was come up with some sort of curriculum to help the families kind of gel as a family. Having these kids coming to live with relatives that they hadn't been with for 10 years. They're grieving the loss of whoever they left behind, the person who raised them, the caregiver, the grandma, or the aunt. And so what I created was a curriculum, always open to feedback, be it negative or positive. And the way it's developed, it's divided into 2 parts. The first part is a parent perspective. We're just trying to get parents to, 1, talk with each other, build their own social network, realize they're not alone in this experience of reunification. And kind of talk through their own experiences of how difficult it was, how challenging it was when they came here. So that when we get into the second piece where we're talking about the children's perspective, they're remembering, oh yeah, that's what it was like for me as well. So we do cover issues such as grief and loss, the travels, the peri-migration issues, the travels to get here, and what it was like acculturating here, and we define acculturation for them. And it's funny because we came up with the curriculum, we had to try it out, and then other people wanted to try it, so we had to come up with a facilitator guide, and then we had to come up with all the evaluations, and then a training guide. So it really has been a snowball that's just building and building. What we've added most recently this summer is a collection of activities that parents and children can do together, and this is my favorite session. So the way we do it is a 3-session class. Parents come the first 2 sessions, and then the kids join them in the third. And it's all activities. If you're a social worker, you're familiar with some of the activities. My favorite is when the kids get in one group, the adults in another, and they do an outline of their body. So they have a 6-foot, 4-foot, whatever body. And then we ask them to, as a group, so they have a group voice and no one person will be called out on anything they say, to talk about for their brain, what are their hopes and dreams, for their tummy, what makes them nervous, what do they find challenging, what do they hope to have one day. And it's just amazing the eloquence that the kids, who some of them have only been here a matter of weeks, then share with this audience of folks about how they're so happy to be reunited, and they hope they remain with their parents, and they hope that they do learn to get along with each other, and they want to go to college, and they want to own a car, and they want to have a girlfriend. So, some of the things that you would expect teenagers to say. So then we developed as well, and I passed some out, and I have a few more, some little booklets. We did this with the United States Committee for Refugee and Immigrants because they said, well, we have a lot of families that we work with as sort of a post-release agency where we don't take them through a class. We only have them for a short period of time. In fact, I think they said they only see about 5 to 10% of those kids that you identified, coming through the border and going to our detention centers. And they're only picking the ones that are so traumatized or have such physical or emotional or learning difficulties that they need that extra attention. So we try to come up with a very interactive booklet that counselors, social workers, teachers, or parents can just do with their families. And so that's what these little ones are. We've also started parent-led support groups. We have a program called we call it Parent Project. It's actually the publisher's name. The real name of the class is Parenting Teens with Disruptive Behavior. So we choose not to use that title. And what that program does, and it comes out of California, it's wonderful, is it teaches parents in collaborative learning groups during the sessions, the 10 sessions, to build their own parent support groups and to kind of take a lead role in that. And what my office provides are some personnel for a few hours who can help them find speakers and, again, find those community resources and school resources so that they're always learning and they're always getting stronger and, again, building that social network. We talk a lot about protective factors for parents and protective factors for children and what that looks like. We do a bit of professional development with our teachers and our staff. As you would imagine, the schools, and we have 200 schools, 209 schools. We have a lot. We're huge. You heard we have about 100, and actually it's higher, 188,000 students. We do our students these students do tend to be in about 10 what we call target high schools. So we're providing a lot of support for those schools. I forgot where I was going with that. We're providing the support for the kids, for the families, as well as what I mentioned with the ESOL program and the educational aspect. Let me see what else. So we try to keep everything very interactive and fun. The goals for the class are that the family will recognize that the reunification process is not easy, and they come to understand the challenges common to all folks who immigrate to the U.S., but the impact that family separation has on the children. So we always bring them back to the impact on the children. They learn ways to promote positive family reunions, and then, of course, we help them identify resources in the community and in the schools. So I think I'll stop there. And I do have more resources that I can hand out. So,
all right, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Carlos Beato, and I'm the principal at the International High School at Langley Park in Prince George's County Public Schools. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about funneling down to what we do in practice. So my school serves 100% English language learners, and you'll see some of the data coming up. Before I get there, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I do this work. Growing up, so my family immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old. And so growing up, I was undocumented, and I was also an English language learner. And so in seeing some of the different practices in schools, and I've always been very metacognitive, and so in seeing some of the practices and looking at the data and how I was the only student to go into a monolingual classroom from 4th to 5th grade in my elementary school. And that to me was shocking. One, it created so many barriers for me because I was no longer traveling with my friends who I had been with for 4 years. But also building new relationships with students who have been speaking English their entire lives was also something entirely different. So some of the resources that they had been provided with in elementary school that maybe I was not attuned to until 5th grade, some of the things that had me thinking about why we do the things we do and how we do them in education. So just wanted to provide a little bit of that. And then, so I'm from New York City originally, and I moved to Prince George's County to be a part of this movement, which I call a movement, because there aren't many schools out there that know how to support English language learners or how to support immigrant students from a variety of perspectives that you've already heard about. But the reason why we started the schools were because our students were going to these different settings and they were not learning. Our kids are not graduating in Prince George's County. English language learners specifically are about 20% below the average graduation rate for a traditional student. So about 56% of our English language learners, immigrant students, are graduating on time, compared to about 76% of all other students. And I wanted to just highlight one of the stories about a parent in PGCPS who was ready to send their kids back to Cameroon had our school not opened. And so we exist for a reason, and we have a few resources that other schools in Prince George's County may not have for a variety of reasons. So I was talking about the graduation rates, and you can see the difference here. One of the things that we saw, and our school is a school of choice, and there are many academies, career academies in Prince George's County, but less than 2% of English language learners were participating in such programs. So they were not able to access these programs. Language, academically, they were not there because of language, and so there was no real way of allowing kids to enter these really competitive programs. So our school is composed of 42% female students, 58% male, which is indicative of the population in Langley Park, predominantly male. I put up here WIDA access levels. These are the language levels of our kids currently based on the WIDA access exams. So a lot of our students are below the 3. Last year when we started and opened our school, 57% of our students were either newcomers or were at a level 1 WIDA access level score. By the end of our first year, only 17% were at a level 1. So huge improvements for our kids, and a lot of that has to do with our language and content integration model through the Internationals Network. And so we work with them around a lot of our professional development practices and training our teachers and really being equipped in working with our students. This is a map representing where our students are coming from. Most of our kids come from Central America. The data shows it's no different in our school. 47% of kids are from El Salvador, and 20% are from Guatemala. And then the other big one is Honduras with 6%. And a lot of kids who are born in the United States as well. So it's about 6% of that. But as you can see, we have a little mini United Nations going on. And I can already see that changing drastically and adding a few more purples into that graphic. 86.52% of our students speak Spanish as a first language at home. And the language that gets second highest is French, 2.81%, but not nearly as high as 86%. So I wanted to start a little bit with human resources because for us it starts at hiring. And so we made sure that we staffed our school with one full-time social worker for now. We opened only last year, and so we have 9th and 10th grade, and we're expanding every year until we reach full capacity in 2018-2019 with our first graduating class. And so we have one full-time social worker, an academic counselor, an outreach caseworker, and I also wanted to highlight the security assistant role in our school because we believe very much in restorative justice practices. So we call him our peace officer and not a security assistant, and that does a lot psychologically to a student and how they perceive a person. Our security assistant, I have issues going back and forth with the naming, but our security assistant, you can always find him tutoring students. It's not about, we have very few suspensions in our school, and we've never had a fight. And this is our second year, and I'm really proud of that. It means we're doing something well culturally in our building, and in how we are designing curriculum and working with our students to really push through those barriers that they're encountering. Our social worker deals with a lot of reunification issues. We have a lot of students who are angry with their parents. They don't want to come to school sometimes, although we do have a really high attendance rate. Our students sometimes don't want to go to school because they might encounter a little brother or sister that they never met and knew about. They tease them because they don't speak English, and they speak English perfectly well. And that's a whole other level of bullying that is still untouched and that deserves some research. So for all you researchers out there, please look into the brothers and sisters and how that plays a role into how our students are performing in schools. All of our teachers are 12-month teachers. The kids do not go to school 12 months, but our teachers are 12-month teachers, which is really important for us in professionally developing our staff and knowing that when the first day of school starts, they'll be a little more ready. They won't be 100% prepared. It's different when you're listening and engaging in practices without students there than it is when the students arrive. So this year we instituted a summer language camp, and so just to teach students survival skills English. And so it gave our teachers an opportunity to work with each other, but also to meet our new students, our newcomers. And it all starts at the hiring process for us. And we have particular sections of our interview process, in our group interview process, where we ask teachers and all staff members to engage in a social-emotional scenario. So all of our teachers are success coaches. And we asked our teachers to be more than just teachers. We asked them to really be engaged in the personalized learning experience for all kids in developing mastery practices in our school. One thing I didn't mention is that we are a mastery-based school, and we are one of the first few schools in the nation to actually start with mastery-based approach with 100% English language learners. There are other schools in New York City, for example, who do this competency-based education system. So we don't do traditional grading. We do levels 1 through 5, 1 being foundational skills, level 5 being college career ready. And I'll explain a little bit about that. So we have 4 overarching competencies that we look at: social emotional, language, critical thinking, and content. And so very important for us is the social emotional. And we're still figuring it out. We're always working out some of the different things that we are and are not doing well. So last year, we sort of incorporated social emotional into everything. And this year, we're more targeting our efforts in advisory. So our students have advisory from Monday through Wednesday for about 40 minutes. And it provides them an opportunity. We use a Circle of Power and Respect advisory curriculum from Origins. And it really helps us build our community. And that's where we start the day. So the students come to a place where they form circles, they build relationships with each other, and they really get to share their feelings. So our teachers each have about 15 students that they're the main point of contact for the families of those students. So we have built a few partnerships that have really helped us. I'm really glad to hear the statistics of the 15% to 73% based on a student just having a lawyer and going to that first immigration meeting. And so CASA really helps provide that whole learning experience and helps us not just concentrate on the academics, but you can see here all kinds of services that they help us provide our students with, including health, immigration, and other kinds of services that our students may not otherwise know about or have access to. We also have a partnership with University of Maryland, with the College of Education and the College of Social Work. With the College of Social Work, we have an additional body in the building, and we're training them to be social workers for our specific student population. So we have currently 2 social work interns. So from Monday through Thursday, we have an additional social worker on site, which is really, really helpful for our students. And then our other partnership, we're working on developing opportunities for students to share their stories, which is really, really exciting. And, you know, at first it's really difficult when you stand there and you're telling kids, you have to be college and career ready, when they have had so many traumatic experiences, when they've been raped on their way to the U.S., when they've been made to join a gang, when they've been violently taken off that train. And so these are stories that we don't often hear about, but these are stories that make our students so resilient and just so awesome, because they know that they're here for a reason, and they work so hard to make sure that they're successful, and whoever's eyes they're wanting to see their success in. We're also building a relationship with La Clínica del Pueblo, and so one of the things that we find often is that our kids can't get to certain resources because of lack of transportation, because they don't know that the resources exist, And so one of the ways that La Clínica del Pueblo is trying to help us out is by providing telemental health services. So we're starting with about 5 students this year, and we're mostly going to start off with students dealing with reunification issues with their parents and or relatives. And so it'll help us see whether this is helpful or not, one, but two, it'll provide us with another service and another, the ability to provide students with more one-on-one interaction with someone that can help them outside of the school building. So we provide the space, the computer, they provide the services. And where we're going in the future, oh, and before I forget, we are working on a partnership with LAYC as well. And through LAYC, we have seen that there is a huge increase in student pregnancies. And there's so many variables as to why that happens. And part of it is the experiences that they've seen their parents go through, et cetera, et cetera. But we want to tackle that on now, now that we're at the beginning of our journey, so that we make sure that our kids have, one, the best education possible, but two, that they have experiences that take them out of this spiral, this ongoing spiral, so that they too feel that they're a part of this society. And so where we're going in the near future, we're a community school model. And so right now, if you visit us, we're behind a school building in Little Temps. And so there are 12 temps back there. So you can just imagine when it rains and it snows. But we're very, very happy there. It gives us a California feel, you know, how all the schools are outside. That's sort of what I want for our community school model as well, because a little sunshine, you know, doesn't do people any wrong. But basically, we'll be a community school model, and we know how, you know, when state funding is involved, how long those kinds of things take. But the idea being that there will be a clinic and a library attached to the school that is accessible to the community when school is and is not in session. So that's where we're going. I hope that it becomes a reality very soon. Space, I believe facilities are really important for how students view school, and having an actual space where they see a hallway that they can call school makes a huge difference in our students. So thank you very much.
I hope you all were as inspired as I was by all these 3 presentations. I have questions for them, but I would really like to open it to the audience for you to share your thoughts or ask any burning questions that you have. And if there are none of those, I will take over, but I would rather have you all ask your questions. Thank you.
Obviously, I have a big passion for the intersection of health and healthcare and education and social services kind of all coming together, and believe very much in the community school model. One of the biggest issues or questions I have in my mind is what we all need to be thinking about in terms of sustaining good practices. And so, you know, so this is for all of you, but particularly for Robin and Carlos. What are the hindrances and what are the facilitators to your plan to maintain what are these really important best practices that you have been able, you know, these innovations that you have been able to bring to the community? You've you've addressed so many barriers in terms of bringing access and language, and you've addressed so many of those barriers. And then I start to get really worried because we see this in communities where innovation occurs, where you mobilize, you have advocacy, and then the biggest challenge is sustaining it. And so I wonder, from the perspectives of what you bring, if you could say something about what you see or what you believe are some of the things that are helping you sustain, or where you're worried things have to come into play to keep this going.
Okay, mine will be short. Part of our program, we've developed a train the trainer for the curriculum. Because we had a grant originally from Wells Fargo, and of course we had to build in sustainability, and that's one reason we also went with the parent-led support group model and giving parents the capacity to lead their own support groups. So whereas we had started with one facilitator for our class, we now have, I don't even know how many, but at least 30 in Fairfax, and we've been all over the place. We also have made it in Fairfax part of the program that the school has to become, if they want the class, they have to become involved. They have to buy into it. They have to, put something in. Childcare, we know that families, you have to honor them. And by honor, I mean you provide childcare and refreshments. We don't just get one or two families. We get 20 to 25 regularly every week, and great attendance. I think it's not so much the class. I think it's that they're making friends, and they're really getting something out of it. The school sees that, so we ask them to provide the childcare and the refreshments. We also ask that a social worker or a counselor be there, one, to represent the school, and they can talk about navigating the school system and all the resources. We've never had any kind of emotional fallout, but what we're dealing with is heavy-duty stuff. And you have parents sometimes for the very first time sharing, intimate details of their family's life. And the facilitators are mostly educators, and so we're not equipped to handle any kind of fallout. So bringing them in as partners, we've also now partnered with, I had mentioned earlier, Neighborhood and Community Services. They've worked us into what they call consolidated funding pool, because sometimes it just all comes down to money. We're not so much funded by the school system. I've had to find funding from all different resources. But because we've gotten to the point where schools now recognize how helpful the program can be, we're now receiving Title III funds funneled through the school system for the class, and for what I will have a project assistant. My wonderful assistant just left because it was a part-time hourly job. But the ESOL enhanced programming that I mentioned earlier, one component of their program is reunification and helping families with that. So the sustainability has come. We've had to really work at getting it as an integral part of the ESOL curriculum, getting it as part of the government institution and what they offer. So that's how we've done it.
So for me, when I walk into a school and I see teachers that can build relationships and staff members that can build relationships with students beyond that of academics, that's what I deem a successful school. So for us, a lot of it is training other people in Prince George's County to begin with. So first, we want to make sure that our model is successful, and then bringing other people in to see what our practices are, what's working, what's not, and really learning and reiterating some of our processes and putting them out there for people to see. But one thing that I didn't mention is the empowerment of our families, which is really important because they're really the members of our communities that we're working for. And so by empowering our families, and really that closes out the whole picture, because once we empower the families, then you're changing communities. And so our role at International High School Langley Park is not just changing our students' lives, we're changing an entire community for the better. And so that's how we see ourselves, that's how we train our students to see themselves. I think that starting there. And we also have really strong parental involvement in our school. And that's partly because we do have an outreach, community outreach caseworker who works really hard at getting our families out there.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to add 30 more seconds onto that? I'm going to be handing these out, and you can take them with you. But those of you in Maryland may know Young Chan Han. She's with the Maryland State Department of Education. We joke that she's me in Maryland, and I'm her in Virginia. She's originally from South Korea, but she's created a great model for family engagement. And we cover this with our parents because, again, we're trying to build their own capacity, which, I'm thinking down the road, maybe they'll be facilitating a class one day. She talks about the cultural survivor, the cultural learner, the cultural connector, and then at the top, the cultural leader. And so we've found this model to be very helpful when we're educating professionals in the school system, because sometimes they don't, I hate to say it, but sometimes they don't think beyond our families as being cultural survivors and learners, and we know, everybody, we know that these families, once they get to the point of being really competent at navigating everything, they want to share. And I also manage a parent liaison program, of which we have 160. And a lot of them started out as, struggling survivors, and now they want to give back to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I work for the Latin American Youth Center in Langley Park. Thank you, Ms. Hamby. I took your training, remember when you did it to PG County. Now, and this is one of the challenges we have, and I'm going to have a question for each of you. The biggest challenge we have right now is getting the school to support us to do these type of things. And I have done it. I have worked with, the social workers at the school, and we have done it, but we don't get the support to get the babysitting. We don't get the support to get funding, to get food and all that. So those have been the challenge, convincing the higher up staff that this is something we need. Now, for Carlos, and I think we're working with you on the sexual education, the teen pregnancy prevention, and that has also been a challenge for us with PG County because they don't want us to do any type of sex education in the school. So how, my question is that, how do you get the decision makers to approve these type of things? How do you convince them, or how do you do it in Fairfax, and how are you doing in PG County, which is where we work, which is very challenging?
Go first this time.
Sure.
Let me think.
For me, and this is just a practice in general, I come in with data. I think when you come in with data, you come in with a lot of power. And so I never walk into a room saying, oh, I need this, without having the data to support it. And so a lot of the things that are happening at IHSLP are happening because we've seen a need for those particular things, but I can support it with all the data. So for example, they try to place a teacher who does not speak or is culturally competent in my building. They are sure going to hear from me. They try to place a social worker in my building that could not speak Spanish. Clearly, I need a social worker that speaks Spanish in a school building with 85% Spanish-speaking families. And I think the power of data is immense. So I don't walk into any room with any higher up without data. And I know that LAYC has a lot of data to prove a lot of the needs that we have. I think also part of it is working directly with a school and having a school principal support you in that process. Part of it is a lot of the school principals don't understand what is going on, right? But you come to my school, I have firsthand experience with a lot of these issues. I am the only Latino male principal in Prince George's County at the high school level right now. Yeah, and to me, it's incredible that we have 30% of our population, student population, is Latino out of 130,000 students, and only one male Latino high school principal in the county. So, yeah.
Sorry, I realized my wows and my O's were coming across. Okay, you were also our very first group that we trained, so, don't share. We've come a long way. Fortunately, Fairfax County is very open to what we have to offer, and I think it's because, as I mentioned, we've been seeing this growth of our immigrant community for over 20 years. We really have. And but I'm also very fortunate in that we have parent liaisons in about 169 of our 200-some schools. They're my voice. Not all of them are Latino. They represent all different cultures, and they outreach to all families. But they really are the voice, and I use them. I use them like a tool in order to get the message to their administrators. And sometimes the administrators will say, okay, maybe we'll do childcare, we'll get volunteers, or we'll get refreshments, but what's in it for us to do this class? And I wish I had more data. We have data. We can show that our classes have been successful. But what we can also show is that these are the parents that will then get involved in a good way in the community, and they'll help you with reaching other families. So it's I'm still working on that. We also use our ESOL teachers as our voice. They don't have the time to spend working with families, necessarily. They're busy with the students, and so they're a voice that gets to the top. But I'm still working on that.
Oh, thank you. I'm working on something that you mentioned, empowering people. I'm working with parents, and I had to find a way how you really do that. And something that we are forgetting, and I am a parent also, the power that we have in order to advocate with the decision makers. So how can we use that power? I think we are forgetting that. We all are forgetting. And of course, being a Latino, being undocumented, with all these limitations, of course we are kind of sure that we don't have that kind of power, but we have. And something that is being really, it is helping to go step by step. For example, I'm always included in everything that I'm doing with the groups, saying, okay, we're going to start learning how a meeting is run. What's a meeting? Okay, let's do a meeting. We can learn a lot from the PTA meetings. So we can start there. Let's go to the meetings. And if we are more than 1, 2, 3 Spanish speakers, so the president will have to find someone who will translate for us. So the language won't be a barrier. Okay, let's go there. And so it's not only, and I'm always telling them, it's not the learning is not going to be good for you. It's the perception that your family will have about you doing this. Oh, my mom is going there. She doesn't speak English, but she's going. She's trying. She wants to learn. And even with fathers, because we know well that normally they don't participate. But that's something. In other words, what I'm doing is forming. I don't want to use because I heard that word, creating leaders. I'm trying to help to form leaders in the community. That's something that I'm passionate about right now.
We have some leadership programs in the county, and they actually evolved over time out of what we have early literacy classes. It's parent education, but they come with their preschoolers, 0 to 5. We tend to take the families that have children on the wait list for Head Start, which has over 700 children on it. But we found that the parents that went through early literacy in Arabic and in Spanish and in Korean and in English we found that they wanted more. And so then we started these leadership sort of empowerment programs where we're getting the parents in the school building, because culturally not all these parents were involved in their home countries. It just wasn't culturally acceptable to really be that involved, that you're telling a teacher what to do or how your child learns best, or volunteering. Volunteering doesn't even translate into Arabic. And so we're helping them. We're taking them into the schools, and we're teaching them about volunteering and what family engagement looks like. And the PTAs, they kind of sometimes start their own PTAs. We start cultural groups where they have one representative maybe attend the more formal PTA or PTO. But sometimes you have to start where you're comfortable, and so they start with their own little cultural groups. So that's one way we're approaching empowering them.
Yeah, and I agree with the taking small steps, but I would also add on distributing that responsibility amongst the partners, because, for example, in our work with CASA is a huge advocacy group, and so they've gone to hearings with our parents and our students, and so nothing like them feeling empowered from a community perspective and not just from the school's perspective. Could be challenging at times when they go representing the school, but they're there and they're aware that they have all of this power as PGCPS parents. They're aware that they can make a change, whether they're undocumented or are immigrants. They know that the power their voices have when they attend some of these meetings. So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for those presentations. I'm struck in both Robin and Carlos's descriptions of what you're doing in your schools, and really wonderful things, at how central parental involvement is. And from the work that we've been doing, one of the hypotheses that we want to explore as we study recently arrived Central American kids in the metro area is that there will be instances in which there is not much of a possibility for parental involvement, either because youth are coming into households in which there isn't anyone who obviously can play that role, and or because they're circulating from one household to another, that they don't have a kind of stable guardianship arrangement. And so I guess my question is, are you seeing that? And what does that do for your efforts to try to bring about this kind of comprehensive educational experience for these students?
So I'll give you a specific example. Last year that we had a student literally had to have her appendix removed, and she is currently in a foster home and getting in contact, well, now she is, but before that she was in a caretaker's responsibility, family friend. They decided to do this, but they didn't know what all the responsibilities that came with being a caretaker. And so we called work, we called cell, we call home, no one to be reached. The student in the meantime is in our office, like literally she looked like she was dying. And those are the instances where as a school we have to make immediate decisions as well, because had we not called an ambulance, taken the kid to the hospital, she could have died. And she had to have 2 operations that day. And only after we had told the caretaker that she was in the hospital, that's when she decided, we called ACS. We had to call ACS. And those are sort of the things that no one ever hears about, but we did have to call ACS because we're mandated reporters. But yes, it happens all the time. I have kids that are living with their brothers and sisters. And one of the things that I wanted to say about that is, like, when there aren't any parental figures around, we become their family. And so it is up to us to provide them with that care, that nurture, that space to be rebellious, that space to explore and be creative all at once. So, you know, I always see our responsibility as educators is not just that of being in the classroom, and I'll keep saying it over and over again. It's building relationships that are meaningful and impactful and that can remind students that they are important. They may not have their parents in their lives. They may not have their immediate caretakers in their lives, but they are important. What they say, what they do is important. And there's nothing more empowering to a student than knowing that they are important to somebody. So.
Wow, that's great. I don't think we're doing enough. I know our numbers have increased. I know we have children living in sheds in the back of a friend's house, kids who reunite and then it's just not working out. We have one parent who was told her teenage daughter who had just arrived that she'd have to buy her own food, you know. So you're trying to keep the child in school, but yet the mom's saying you have to buy your own clothes, you have to buy your own food, you can't use our refrigerator, you need your own refrigerator. And so, to be honest, I don't know what's being done. I know that our schools try to be very nurturing. I want your school to come over to us. Our schools tend to be very, very large, and I do think some of these kids end up as dropouts or they're just getting lost in the system. I used to teach a juvenile detention center, so I know where some of them do end up.
I feel terrible for having to close the session, but it's 2:45. Would you join me in thanking our wonderful panel? I think they're sticking around. They're attending the conference, so you can follow up with them if you have any questions.
And I have
Thank you.